Welcome to the Surviving Siblings podcast. I'm your host, Maya Roffler. As a surviving sibling myself, I knew that I wanted to share my story, my brother's story. I lost my brother to a homicide in November 2016, and after going through this experience, I knew that I wanted to share my story and his story. And it's taken me quite some time to come to the mic to tell it, but I knew it was an important one to tell. So here I am to share his story and mine with you. And it's important that I tell the story of the surviving sibling, the forgotten mourner, the story that is not told enough. So thank you for coming with me on this journey. And now it's your turn to share your stories. Today I have another incredible guest, another surviving sibling here with me. Her name is Jen Schwartz. Jen and I connected in so many ways about the losses of our brothers. And one major thing we have in common is we both lost our brothers in 2016. So Jen, I want to welcome you to the Surviving Siblings podcast. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Maya. Thank you so much for having me here. This is pretty cool.
Yes, it's definitely not a club that we want people to join, but nice to know we're not alone. Right, Jen?
For sure. I say that all the time to my sibling group that it's nice to meet you. I'm sorry we have to meet. This is the shittiest club no one knows about until they're in it. But if you have to be in it, it's good to be in it with people who get it. So, yeah.
One of the first things you said when we connected, and I was like, we were instantly bonded. It was a nice thing to hear, comforting. So, Jen, I don't want to waste too much time. I want to dive right in and talk about your lovely brother and tell his story because that's what we're here to do. So, tell us a little bit about your brother.
Sure. So I lost my older brother. His name is Lewis. We called him LB, Lewis Benjamin. Lost him in 2016. Yeah, he was typical older brother. Like there was nothing he could have done wrong in my eyes, although he did plenty wrong and I spent a lot of time like not being able to stand him, but that's typical I think for siblings. But I routinely told him throughout our lives that like just the mere fact that he was my older brother like automatically made him like the coolest person I would ever know. And like that's all he needed to do was just be my big brother. I have a younger brother also. His name is Matt, and we were a typical 3-child family. I was a very typical middle child. It was an interesting dynamic, the three of us. Could never all three get on the same page about anything at once. 2 of us were always speaking. 1 of us was always on the outs. But I think that's kind of typical, and that's how it was. So I lost him July 3rd, 2016, and I remember we had been texting the night before, big baseball fans, Met fans, and the next day I was getting updates about the Met game, and I was watching it on TV at some restaurant we were at, and they were like destroying the Cubs, like just kept scoring, and like it was an insane game, and I kept texting my brother, like, did you see that play? Like, look how many runs they're scoring. I can't believe this. Like, they're going to sweep them. And he wasn't responding, which I didn't think twice about. I knew he was working. He worked in the restaurant business. So it was pretty common that if you texted him when he was at work, he wasn't going to get back to you right away. So again, I thought nothing of it. So we had been out for the day with my family, like my wife and kids and my in-laws. And we had just gotten home. And I was sitting in the backyard. And my sister-in-law, my brother's wife, called me. And like I am known to do, I ignored her phone call because I don't love talking on the phone. But we had also spoken like a day or two before, and I knew she was calling to make plans for our kids to see each other that coming week. So I was like, I'll call Sherry back in a few minutes, figure out when we can meet up with her. So had a missed call, and she immediately called back, which was not typical for Sherry because she knows I just don't answer the phone. And so I answered, and she was like panicked and talking like a mile a minute about how she hadn't been able to get in touch with my brother. She was driving home from South Carolina. She had taken my nephews to visit my parents. My brother was back in New York working, and she hadn't been able to get in touch with them. And she was just trying to let him know, like, we're leaving, this is when we're coming back. And she's like, finally, I got a phone call from him, and I was so relieved. She's like, and I answered it, but like, it wasn't him. It was a police officer asking if I was like Lewis's wife, and I said that I was. and wanted to know if I was home. And she said that she wasn't home, but she was driving home from South Carolina. She was 20 minutes away. Like, what's going on? And the only information they told her was that the police would meet her like at the house, and they confirmed the address. So she was asking all sorts of questions, and they just kept saying, someone's going to meet you at the house. So that's what she was relaying to me. And I was like, I'm getting in the car. Like, I'll be there as soon as possible. So we lived about a half hour away from each other. So I went into my house and told my wife about the phone call. And I said, I'm going down there. Like, I'll let you know what's going on when I get there. And she was like, no, like, I'm coming with you. Like, I'm driving. Like, let's go. I've often said it was the most surreal 30 minutes of my life because, like, I knew he was dead because I knew, but I didn't know because no one had told me that. But I just kept replaying the phone call with Sherry, and I was like, look, if he was in an accident, they would have said that. If he was in the hospital, they would have said that. Like, there would have been information. And we've all watched enough cop shows to know that the only thing they don't tell you on the phone is when someone has died. So I spent 30 minutes like knowing he was dead, but still actively on my phone Googling his name with like local news and car accidents or anything to like prove that whatever I was thinking like wasn't real. So we pulled up to their house, and I think I like got out of the car before it even stopped, and Sherry just like walked right at me from the driveway, hysterical crying, and was like scream crying like, he's gone, he's dead, he's dead, he's gone. And it was crazy. My nephews, who were 4 and 6 at the time, were sitting like removed at the top step like of their house, and she was like down at the bottom of the driveway. And I looked at her, and ironically the first thing out of my mouth was, what am I going to tell my parents? And she looked at me without missing a beat, and she was like, what am I telling my kids? And it took me a half a second, and I was like, fuck, this good, everything changes now. Like, this is it. It was just so much bigger than I don't know. I don't know how else to describe it. So we were crying and hugging for a little bit, and then I needed to call my brother Matt. So I called him, and he loves talking on the phone, and he's always on speakerphone. So I called him, and he was driving, and he just talked over me, and he was like, oh, hey, Jen, what's up? Say hi to Joanna. It's his wife, my other sister-in-law. Like, what are you doing? And I was like, Matt. And I was crying, and I was like, sorry, like, LB died this morning. And he was like, wait, what did you say? And I was like, I don't know, he died. So he asked all these questions that I, at the time, had no answers to, but I told him that I was at their house, and could he, like, get there as soon as possible? And he said, we're in the car driving now. We'll be there in 20 minutes or whatever. And I said, Matt, mom and dad don't know. Like, I called you first. So he asked me to wait and not call my parents immediately so we could call them together, which we did. And that was, yeah, a traumatic phone call, I think, for everyone. And then, yeah, like the rest of that night, we were just at Sherry's house and trying to figure out logistics about my parents getting back to New York from South Carolina. They wanted to drive 12 hours through the night, and they drive that often, but like they just found out that their fucking kid died, and there was no answers, no information. And I was like, you can't do that. But that's what they ended up doing. And we stayed at the house until about midnight, just sitting with the boys and with Sherry and contacting family and his friends. And I have this distinct memory of saying over and over to myself, like, oh, that's why he didn't text me back about the Met game today. Like, I was like, I was texting a dead person. Oh shit, I was sending a text to my brother. He didn't answer me because he was dead. And it was just these weird, really short, concrete, tangible thoughts that I just kept repeating to myself. And I don't know if I was doing that because I was just trying to like get it to sink in, or I don't know. It stuck with me, and it's always stuck with me. So yeah, that's how I lost my brother. So we ultimately found out that he died of a heart attack in his sleep. The reason the police didn't have information, so we live in New York. He died in New Jersey. So the police officers who were sent to the house, like, literally had a piece of paper that they handed my sister-in-law and said, I don't know, we have no information. We just know that he's dead, and you need to call like this police station and get information from them, which I don't know. I guess that's how it has to happen, but it seemed pretty like surreal and crazy and ridiculous all at once. So yeah.
And he was very young. He was 39, right?
He was 39 years old, which I have never forgiven him for because I had to turn 40 and he just got to be always in his 30s. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel that way about my brother. He's forever in his 20s, so we connect on those things. I understand that.
It took me a week or two before I started to have the thought, like, oh shit, I'm going to be older than my older brother one day. And like, I don't know, at some point pretty early on, like literally calculated like the number of days and like the exact date that I would turn like a day like older than him, which happened this past year, maybe. Now I'm going to be 41, but a little over a year ago. That was just weird in and of itself, but
But I think that's a common thing. I actually really love that you brought that up, Jen, because I think for the surviving siblings that are listening, which are a lot, it's a common thing. And it's something you may think about pretty quickly, like you did, because we all have different ways of coping with it, right? I'm saying this coping with bunny ears. Yeah, coping. What is that? We'll talk about that later in this episode. But so we think about odd things like that we never would have thought of, right? So I really love that you brought that up. It's interesting. Yeah.
yeah.
It didn't hit me till later too. I'm like, wow, I just turned 30. He's never going to see a 3 in his age, right? And like I think about it every year because my brother and I have the same birthday. I'm like, wow. So it hits home all the time. And I see a lot of people in different groups talking about that. So love that you brought that up. We hope you're enjoying this incredible episode of the Surviving Siblings podcast. I'm your host, Maya Roffler. We'll be back in just a minute after hearing from our incredible sponsor. We are members of a club no one wants to join. This is how bereaved parents and siblings describe themselves. During the worst time in their lives, COPE helps families. COPE is a nonprofit grief and healing organization dedicated to helping families living with the loss of a child. Started by bereaved parents, COPE offers professionally facilitated support groups, a grief support phone line, and monthly healing workshops, including yoga, meditation, Reiki, art, movement, music, writing, and journaling. Founded in 1999, COPE has grown to support children and teens who have lost a loved one, particularly through COPE's Camp Erin NYC, a free summer weekend experience to support kids and parents who are grieving. Traumatic and complicated grief takes a physical and emotional toll on survivors. Our COPE families learn they are not alone and gain tools that incorporate healthy coping mechanisms into their bereavement process. Parents, siblings, and families grow and heal as they learn to live with their devastating loss. Learn more and connect at copefoundation.org.
Yeah, for sure. Look, a lot of things crossed my mind, and I'm sure yours and a lot of people's, that we just had no reason to believe they were ever going to cross our minds. Really, until my brother died, I didn't even consider the possibility that I would lose one of my brothers. I think a lot of people, obviously, you think about like losing your grandparents, you think about losing your parents, not in a like, oh, I'm looking forward to that, but you expect that's going to happen. Yeah, it's like my brain just was not wired to even consider that like at any point in my life. And I don't think I knew anyone who had lost a sibling like prior to me, so it wasn't like, oh, of course that could happen. I don't know. Yeah.
No, absolutely. You and I discussed that when we first connected. And I think, again, you brought up another wonderful point that I'm sure all of you guys can connect with as well, that you may not know anybody. I didn't. This was so foreign. I was connecting with people around me that were telling me, oh, I lost my mom or I've lost my dad. And that was early. I was 30 years old and having friends in their 20s or 30s. And that's young to lose your parent. But little did I know there was this whole other world of surviving siblings that really got where I was coming from. So this is powerful stuff.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So what was it like for you as the days went on after that with just your whole family dynamic and for you personally, Jen?
So like the first couple of days and the first week was just sort of like autopilot mode, right? So planning a funeral and then like sitting Shiva and just logistics. Like I remember, I don't know, the day before his funeral, going to the airport to pick up people that were coming in from out of town and going to Target like 12,000 times to pick up things for the house so that we had food or just, I don't know, you think about people who are going through any kind of loss. And I don't know, I didn't think it was going to be like that. So like still routine day-to-day stuff but it has to get done. The world keeps going on and you have to go day to day because it's not stopping for you. It's hard. My parents live in South Carolina and they have lived there. They had moved down there a couple of years before my brother died. And so his funeral was on a Wednesday. I will say the other weird thing, and I hate to say weird, but my brother Matt's birthday is July 5th. So it was the 2 days after our brother died and a day before his funeral. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes, that was weird and hard. Yeah. That was harder for me to say than I thought it would be.
Creeps up on you, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I was going through all these things this afternoon about like what I knew what I was going to be talking about, and I cried a number of times today, but I wasn't expecting that. So yeah, celebrating someone's life and then like burying our brother the next day. So yeah, so that was that. But anyway, so my parents, they went back to South Carolina 3 days after the funeral. And it was just weird because there's so much going on like the first few days in that week, and there's so many people in and out, and then it's just like silent and there's no one around anymore, which was nice for like a half hour or an hour. And then I was like, well, wait, now I'm just alone, like with my thoughts and my feelings, like what? So I went back to work the following Monday, which I don't know why I did that. I know why I did that, right? Like I could not continue to sit and just think and feel. But within like 3 hours, I was text my boss and I was like, okay, never mind, I'm going home. And everybody at work was really cool about it. So like that wasn't a huge deal, but I tried to distract myself for a little bit. Didn't work so well. And then I spent the rest of that summer like just telling myself, get through the summer and then you're going to be fine. Like a new season, like school year's going to start, work's going to pick back up, like just get out of like this summer season. And yeah, so that never happened because it turned to September and I was like, okay, still dead. And my birthday's in September and I was like, well shit, like now I have to have a birthday? Like he's never going to have another birthday. And then it just, from there, it just was a spiral of thoughts and about the future and what that was going to look like. And I remember writing like just a list, like page-long list of all the things that I thought were going to be different, like from that point on. And things that you don't, I guess, I don't know that I ordered, like that I would have thought would be different, but like just they were different and it was always going to be different. And I just kept saying, this is life now. This is life. This is normal life. This is life. And then it wasn't, I'm sure at some point earlier on, the phrase the new normal was said to me. And I was like, well, shit, that makes a lot of sense. Like, because that's what it is. It's not normal, but it is your normal. And you've got to figure out a way to get on board with that, because if you can't, you're just going to be stuck. I knew myself well enough to know that I had no idea how I was going to help myself. So I Googled, because that's what you do, and found an agency on Long Island COPE, that has support groups for parents who've lost children and siblings who have lost siblings. And I don't know, I mean, I know why I signed up to go, but I mean, I'm not someone who likes being in groups of people, and I'm not one who likes to talk about their feelings. So the idea of going to a support group for this was like, I don't know what you're doing, but I went, and I've said this to anyone like a number of times over the last 6 years, like the 90 minutes that I spent in that first group, I felt more connected to like the complete total strangers like in that room than I had like felt to anyone in my life, like as it related to my brother. I don't think I said more than a couple of sentences that night. There's no expectation for anyone to have to speak or whatever. But the words that were coming out of these people's mouths, like, I was like, holy cow, like, yes, 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 that's exactly, okay, I'm not crazy. Like, I'm not a lunatic. So, like, just that shared connection and that shared experience, like, of a loss that really doesn't get talked about or, yeah, acknowledged, I think, in the same way or in an equally meaningful way, maybe, as when parents lose children or when young children, like, lose their parents. So, yeah, that was the best thing I ever did for myself, was to join that support group. And yeah, the people there, like I said earlier, they're people I've never wanted to have had to meet. Like, I wish I didn't have to know them. I wish we all didn't have to know each other. But yeah, we're in this shitty club that none of us knew existed until we were in it. So yeah, so those are my people.
I want to ask you this, Jen. Thank you for being so. I say this with everybody who comes on here that's just so vulnerable and open. Thank you. For someone who's not emotional, you're being very vulnerable. So I appreciate that about you. And it's another reason we connected. And we also have birthdays in September, but we've already talked about that too. But no, I really want to understand a little bit more. And I'm sure it's going to be helpful for everybody listening, all of you surviving siblings too. What do you think was that final point for you that kind of pushed you? How far were you into the grieving journey? I don't think you were that, I mean, it's only a couple months, right? When you realized, a couple weeks, how far were you into the journey, and what pushed you to be like, I gotta be around some people. Like, I've got to go talk to this group. Because I was always impressed when we first connected and you told me that, because that's pretty advanced. It takes people a lot. It took me a lot longer to get to that point. So I'd love if you could share with us a little bit about that, just a little more detail.
Yeah. So he died July 3rd. Funeral was July 6th. And I think the first group that I went to was July 20th, maybe.
Oh
Like,
my
I
God.
was.
So days.
Yeah. Yeah. And it wasn't even so much that I was looking to be around people. Like, I didn't think, even going into it, I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go here and people are going to get it. I was just sort of like, I don't know what I'm going to need, but I'm going to need something. And well, this place says they offer something for people like me now. So I did that. And I remember, you had to call and do an intake before you can come to your first group. And I said to whoever I was speaking to, I think it was the clinical director at the time, I said, is this too soon for me? Like, cause I feel like, I don't know. And she was like, well, the fact that you're asking if it's too soon, like, makes me feel like you're aware that it's very soon. And she's like, if you're pursuing this, like, I'm not going to say no. She's like, it could be more triggering for you maybe than like other people who are going to be there. And I was like, yeah, no, I need something. And I think if I wait, like, I'm going to not pursue it again. So that was that. That was 2-3 weeks after his death. And there weren't a ton of people there. Like, my first night, it's monthly. But aside from hearing other people say the things I was thinking and feel the feelings I was feeling, the people that were there were people who were like a year, 2 years, 3 years out from losing their sibling. And I remember my friend Nicole my now friend Nicole, she was there, and she said that it had been like 2 years since her brother died. And I was like, shit, years are going to pass and he's still not going to be here. Like, it was the first time that it made me like think long-term into the future, because I was going day by day, hour by hour, even maybe at that point. And I was like, oh my God, it's been 2 weeks and I'm like out of my mind. I didn't even think about a year from now or 2 years from now. So that sent me down a little bit of like a thing. But then I immediately was like, well, look, she's here. Like, she survived it. Like, she got through it. And I think the other people who were there that night were also like more than a year out from like the loss of their sibling. And I was like, all right, well, these people were once sitting in my shoes and having to, if not say to a group, like, acknowledge, oh shit, my brother died 2 weeks ago. Like, and now they're able to say it's been 2 years or it's been 3 years. So that was a little bit of hope, I think, that like somehow, I mean, I knew I was going to get through that, and I didn't think there was like an option to not continue moving forward in life. But it was super helpful just to be with people who did it like before me, like, and they were standing right in front of me, and I was like, okay, it's like they could do it, I could do it. So that was super helpful.
Yeah, I think that is really powerful what you just shared, Jen, because I think seeing people and being inspired by people and knowing that you can make it, even today, when I see people that have like are 20 years, 30 years, I have people 40 and 50 now that have reached out to me because I've done this podcast. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to make it. I still need that inspiration. And I didn't really realize that. So I'm so impressed by you and I'm inspired by you because I did not have that insight myself, because I understand your story so much about being just numb and not, it's just so much to take in.
Yeah.
And you just hit your 6-year death anniversary of LB. So we're sending so much love up to him right now. And I know he's with us in this conversation. I can just feel it. But
He's everywhere.
everywhere, right?
Everywhere.
I mean,
Yeah.
I believe that too. But I think that's really powerful. But I'd love for you to give us a little bit of advice, and then we'll continue on with your story, because I want to hear more about the continuation of you going to group and how your grief journey continued. But what is some advice you would give to people? Because I see this in a lot of groups that I'm a part of and another connections I've made throughout. I'm coming up on my 6 years, so I'm like right behind you. You went so quickly. Again, I'm just so blown away and inspired by you. But when do you think it's the right time for someone? I think you just got to know yourself. You know yourself very well, Jen. So I think it's just about listening to yourself. But what's your advice on that? Really important to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. You need to listen to yourself, but I think it's also scary. Like, I think as much as people might want to seek support or seek like relationships with people who are in like their situation, it's a scary thing. For some people, it makes it really real. Like, it's real regardless, but to like sit in a room with a group of people and like say the words, like, it just, I don't know, it's a next level of real, maybe. I don't know that it was so awesome that I jumped in like after like 2 weeks later, but it worked for me. It doesn't mean it's going to work for everyone. But there are people in our sibling group now who joined for the first time. And there's one woman who said it's been 10 years since she lost her sibling. And after the first group, she was like, I can't believe I waited. Like, I was afraid of this. Like, this is the best I've felt. And everyone feels so freaking awkward saying it, because like, I'm telling you, for like the first 3 years, like, it was like the one thing on my calendar that like I worked my life around it. Like, I was not missing group. It was fun. Like, it was a way for me to like smile and laugh. And we did laugh a lot, and because we felt like we could laugh with each other and like share stories about our siblings or share stories about our families that like they were going to get, even if they didn't know our families, because they were going through similar stuff. So like, it's weird to say it, but I still have fun when I go to my sibling group. And I think that's the vibe that we go for. Like, there's a lot of crying, yes, but like I don't know, you have to be able to laugh at something. So yeah, listen to yourself, but also like, if whatever is holding you back is fear or like feeling like you can't do it or you don't know what to say, no one's ever going to force you to say something. Just listen to other people. And I think hearing other people talk about the things that you're thinking, or hearing other people like share feelings that you've had for however long you've had them, will just encourage you to keep going and encourage you to want to speak and like share some of your truth or some of your story.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful advice. Oh, I love that. I love that. And I think as surviving siblings, there's just so many dynamics that happen for us within. I mean, you touched on this a little bit earlier, so maybe we can talk about this too, Jen, before we again continue forward in your grief journey. I mean, we're still in the first year with you, and just so much to unpack. I relate to that, and I'm sure a lot of you guys listening do as well, if not all of you. But your brother was married, and so you have Sherry, you have his children, and then you have your parents. So there's a lot of family dynamics happening. So I think it's really important for you to share how you navigated that process immediately and then also through your grief process. Do you want to share a little bit on that?
Yeah, of course. So it was tricky at best for the first year, for sure. So like I said, my parents were back in South Carolina. My sister-in-law was now a single parent raising a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. And my younger brother at the time was still living on Long Island. He has since moved to South Carolina. But that first year, it was really hard. Sherry definitely like took some steps back from me and my family. And I knew I knew in my head it wasn't about me personally. She was angry at my brother, and I get it. I'm an extension of him. Like my parents are an extension of him. Matt's an extension of him. And she kind of isolated from us. Never nasty, like never malicious, just the phone calls weren't as frequent. We still got to see our nephews. It just didn't feel how it had always felt before. But again, nothing was ever going to feel how it felt before. So she was angry, rightfully so. My parents were angry. My parents were devastated. My parents, I think their biggest fear almost immediately was that they were never going to see their grandkids again, which I never once thought was actually going to happen. And I spent a number of conversations with my mom, especially. She's more of a talker than my dad, almost begging her to like give Sherry space. Like, I know you're grieving. I know she is grieving. We are all grieving, but it's different for all of us. We had different relationships with him. There were different factors going on. The more you push, or the more you try to get in, however you're trying to get in, right now, Sherry can't handle that. Like you're gonna push her away, which is the thing you want to happen like least in the world. So there was a lot of navigating, I guess, for lack of a better word, or like trying to help those relationships sort of heal and repair more naturally than in a forced way. Like, would it have been great if we all were just right back to where we were? Yeah, sure. That would have been really weird though too. Like to act as if nothing had happened and that we should just go back to the way things were. So that was never going to happen. And Sherry moved to Long Island, obviously with my brother, but her family was not from New York. Her mom had passed away 3 months before my brother did. So she had, she had 2 really huge losses kind of back to back. And she has a brother who lives in California and a sister who kind of travels all over for work, and her dad. So she decided pretty quickly that she was gonna sell the house in New York and move to Florida and start over. And it sucked, but I got it 100%. She deserved it. My nephews deserved it. Like she had friends on Long Island for sure. Like my brother's friends were her friends, but like she just wanted to be with family. And look, was I her family? Yes, I still am. Was Matt her family? Yeah, he still is. But like she wanted to be with her dad, and her dad had just lost his wife. So I got that. So they, before even a year had passed, like by mid-June of the following year, they had relocated to Florida. And I know my parents were upset about that because I think they felt that was just another step in the we're never going to see our grandkids again. I think my parents were hoping she would move to South Carolina to be closer to them. And they had offered to do whatever she needed in terms of helping take care of the boys, help raise them, help out in however way they could while she figured her life out and decided what she wanted to do or what she felt like she could do. But look, I get it. She moved to be closer to her dad. So that was the immediate. That was the first year. And then by the end of the second year, Matt moved to South Carolina. And then I found myself suddenly a weird version of an orphan in New York. So it was weird and difficult. So yeah.
That's a lot for you, and that's why I wanted you to elaborate a little bit more on that, Jen, because yes, you had your immediate, your wife, your partner, your kids, but to have your family just kind of all like leave and the extensions of your brother. I would imagine how your mother feels, and this is going out on a limb because I'm not a grandmother and I haven't gone through that process, but what I'd imagine is that's what she has left of your brother, right? So that's kind of what she's grasping at. And I think your advice was just so beautiful. Like, let her breathe, let Sherry breathe. And because everyone grieves so differently. And I think that's the wonderful advice that you were giving. And that took me a long time to realize too, because I was judging everybody else. I was like, how can you not feel this as intensely as me? Or there's not two people in my family that grieved the same way, right? And it sounds the same for you, right? So
Yeah, and look, don't get me wrong. I was like secretly judging in my head, not judging, but like I just didn't understand all the anger. What was the anger going to do? Like I think I can honestly say I've never been angry at my brother, at Sherry, at it's just sad. It's devastatingly sad, and I just think the faster people can recognize that their anger is really an extension of sadness, like the sooner you can start to maybe like start healing.
that's powerful. That's powerful stuff right there, because that is so true. I mean, whoa, we need to just sit in that for a second. Because I mean, that's true, Jen. Like, that's huge. Yeah, it is. Just like our grieving is just the love that we have for that person, and it's always going to be with you. It's how do you move forward with that? So,
Yeah,
I mean, yeah. So here you are now, a
here
year
I
in,
am.
and you're by yourself. So how do you keep propelling forward? You know me. I don't say move on because we don't move on. We're here 6 years later, still talking about these guys, right? We love them. So how do you continue to move forward in your grief journey? Tell us about that.
And look, honestly, so like my wife has been amazing, never anything less than like awesome. My kids the same. Cope and my sibling group was just a huge like that's it. Like for the first year, for the second year, for the third year, just to have a place and people. And after the third or fourth month, I guess, that I had been going, I had emailed our facilitator after one of the groups, and I was like, do people in the group like talk outside of group? Because like I know I'm still new, but like I walk through the parking lot to get to the same building, and we all sort of walk in together, but like not together, and no one spoke in the parking lot. But then as soon as we'd like walk through the door, you'd be like, "Oh, hey, how are you?" And then we'd spend 90 minutes talking about like this really intense shared connection, right? And shared experience and just being totally like raw and vulnerable. And then we'd walk through the doorway to go back to the parking lot, like back to real life. And like nobody spoke again. And I was like, it's so weird to me. Like people just wait 30 days before they can like have a conversation again. So I asked her, and she said, I think some people like maybe are friends on like social media, or like they might like text each other. She's like, but like you have the email addresses, like reach out to someone if you want to. So that's sort of what I started doing, like from the next group on. Like if anyone new came to group, like that night I was going home and sending an email and just saying, hey, it's like Jen from sibling group, just wanted to say hi, like glad you came tonight, sorry you had to be there, like sorry we had to meet, but like I'm glad you came, and like I hope you come back next time, like it's been the best thing for me, like I look forward to this every month, which again feels so ridiculous saying, but it was true, it's still true. So I sort of, someone at some point called me like the unofficial welcoming committee.
I was just gonna call you that. I was like, you were like the welcome committee for this. That's amazing. Yeah.
And then I don't know, like a year into it, I was like, this is so dumb. Like we're all driving like to get here at 7:00. Like anybody want to meet for drinks or dinner like before group, or like go for a drink like after group? So we started doing that for a while, and that wasn't mandatory. You didn't have to do it, and people had work commitments. But like for a good year or so, like before a group, like there'd be like 4 or 5 of us that would like meet at a local restaurant or a bar beforehand, or like we'd go out for a drink after, and just keep the conversation going. And it was so nice because we didn't, like, we all knew each other because we had lost a sibling, but like we just started to know each other as people also, and like we learned about each other's lives and what we do in real life, not inside of like our little cope bubble where you just talk about your dead siblings and your families. And yeah, so like a lot of us are like friends now. We started like a group text that we're up to like 25 people in it, and it's great because we're all friends on social media. So we get the birthday alerts. So every time it's someone's birthday, someone's sending the balloons out and wishing everyone happy birthday. Or if we see that someone like accomplished something or someone's kid did something, we're like blowing it up in a group chat. So like it's great because we know each other for something so shitty. And at any time, if anyone's having like a rough time or like it's a bad day, like, yeah, they send a text. And sometimes I like look at my phone in the middle of a work day and I have 86 texts and I'm like, oh, what's happening there? And I open it up and I'm like, all right. And then I gotta like scroll up and see what was happening. But someone is always there to respond, whether it's for something shitty or something like awesome. And I think it's really great. So yeah.
I think it's really great too. Yeah.
And I know you have used the term surviving siblings, but we affectionately call ourselves like the sibling losers because we have lost a sibling, but we're kind of like no one thinks about the siblings. So we're just like, it's our sibling loser group. So we like it. And we understand it's said with affection, not like
Oh my gosh,
actual losers, but yeah.
No, I love that. No, because I get it, and I'm sure you guys listening get that as well. We get that, right? We get those terms, just like we like forgotten mourner, surviving sibling, sibling losers. I love it. I love it. But I love just how open and honest you are, just sharing this journey, because this was so, I mean, obviously integral into you being able to move forward and you being able to do it successfully and just be able to feel and be yourself. I mean, you're very extroverted like me, Jen. So we need to be around and connect with people. And so I can't believe it. I'm going to say like one of the people in group, I can't believe it took me this long to find these groups, but that's a little bit more just because I don't have as much around me here. But it's surprisingly enough, in such a big city like Atlanta, there's really just not. But
I do have to interrupt. I am the last thing one would describe as an extrovert. I am such an introvert.
But that's so weird because with this, you were. So tell us, so explain that. Why you felt you wanted to go to this then.
Yeah, I don't know.
Isn't that interesting?
It is interesting, and I'm still surprised by it. Like every month that I like willingly go to a group situation, because there's plenty of group situations in life, like not support group wise, right? Even social things that I will shy away from. I don't love them. I don't know. Maybe it's just having something like tangible or like specific to connect to with someone, like, and it's not the only thing we talk about, but it is just a common thread that's there. I don't know, but I'm definitely an introvert playing the role of an extrovert, maybe. Yeah.
Oh, I like that. Like how you put that. That's interesting. And I think that's even more inspiring though, for all of you guys listening, that you can do this and you can connect with people, especially when it's something like this that you need connection. You do. It's been so important to me too. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I appreciate you sharing that you are actually an introvert, because I think that's inspiring when people know that. Because they're like, oh gosh, these two are out here just talking about their life and putting it all out there. So,
and look, I'll be honest, I still, like I said, I go to sibling groups still almost every single month. I have missed maybe like 2 or 3 in the last 6 years. But the reason that I continue to go now is not so much like for me, right, to like share my story, but I remember how powerful it was my first time, right? Like being around someone who was not 2 weeks out of their death, who like had gotten through a year, who had gotten through 2 years. And I probably could have stopped going for like, I don't know, for lack of a better phrase, personal benefit, like years ago.
Yep.
But I just want to keep showing up because people need to know that like, if someone is going to go out on a limb and take a risk and be vulnerable and like go to group, I think they need to be able to know that like someone there like has been through this experience and like can live to tell the tale. So yeah, but that's, I share that pretty often, that like I am not one who likes to talk about feelings. I am not one who likes groups, but that's how good this group is and that's how helpful it's been that I keep doing it and I like doing it. So yeah, introvert playing the role of an extrovert.
I love that. I think some of you guys should steal that one too, because that's a really good one. Because I am an extrovert, so I can't steal that one, but that's a really good one. An introvert playing the role of an extrovert. I love that. Well, I want to back up to something really quick, Jen, and then we're going to come back to the Cope Foundation, because I want to dive into that, and because you've been involved for literally 6 years, like yes. On the dot, which is really, really cool. So happy 6-year anniversary with Cope. That's
Thank
awesome.
You. Yeah.
But I want to go back to something and then we'll come forward again. we talked a little bit about, kind of danced around it, being the forgotten mourner, and how we're not focused on really in this equation of losing our, whether it's a brother like both of us, or a sister, or God forbid multiple siblings, which happens, and it's an awful tale too, tremendous loss, but we're forgotten about, because this is something you and I've talked about, so I have to bring this up. It's really been ingrained in us from the time we're very young that to lose a child is the worst thing that can happen. You know where I'm going with this already. I love it.
Yep.
For someone's sake, to lose a child is the worst thing that can possibly happen to you. And this will lead us into cope very beautifully, right? Because you guys support families in general, which is just wonderful. But what is your personal take on that? And how did you navigate that? Because you had so many dynamics happening. You had your parents who lost their son. You had your sister-in-law who lost her husband. And then you have the nephews that have lost their father. So those are some of the worst losses you can go through, but here you are as the sister, right? So tell me a little bit about your perspective on that, because we all know mine. Yeah.
So yeah, I think just, yes, it's ingrained in us from society from very young, right? The worst loss you can experience is the loss of a child. And looking back, it's so crazy to me, but the number of times my mom said that to me and to my brothers, like throughout our childhood, and I'm sure it was in reference to someone losing a child or a child being sick, but just, if I have to think of like the one thing that my mom like really like felt that strongly about and like voiced her like emotion or thoughts about, it was that is the worst loss you can endure. And I don't think she was ever saying it from the perspective of a parent who could potentially lose a child. I don't think she was actively thinking the worst thing that would happen to me is if one of you guys died. But then it happened. So that's that. And then, look, I said it myself. It never occurred to me that siblings died until my sibling died. So, like, I get the idea of the forgotten mourner, right? But I think it's a really shitty thing that siblings are kind of overlooked. It's just something I don't think you can understand until you're in the situation. I mean, you could say the words and I would understand what you were saying to me cognitively, but I could not have grasped that emotionally until I lived it. So the days that followed and the weeks that followed and the months that followed, the questions that were asked of me the most by anyone, almost everyone, not everyone though, how are your parents? How is Sherry? How are the boys? And in my head, I was like, fuck off. I'm great too, thank you. Matt's awesome. Like, what? And I don't know that people weren't calling my parents and saying, how are Jen and Matt doing? But like, I don't know for sure that was happening. But I know what I know, which is that anyone I came into contact with was, how are your parents? And I was like, yeah, no, like how do you think they suck? Like they are like, not, they don't suck. Sorry, mom and dad, you guys do not suck. They're in a really shitty place right now. Like, I don't know how to answer your question. But also, you could ask me how I was doing. Even if I didn't have an answer for you, you could ask it, but I just don't know that people think that siblings are impacted in a way that is just as meaningful as parents, or as someone like my sister-in-law who lost her husband, or like my nephews who lost their father. Do I think the loss is the same? Nope. Do I think the grief or the process of grieving is the same? Nope. But I don't think that the same means less than or more than. I just think it's different. Things can be equally impactful and meaningful and significant, but not be the same. So, yeah. That's my perspective on that.
Yep. Good wrap up. I love that, Jen. You did it again. Great wrap up at the end there. My new short term for explaining this is different and deep.
There you go.
Done. Right. I mean, because
different,
people
deep,
just
and done.
Different, deep, and done. There we go. DDD, triple D. There we go. I love like wordplay and stuff, but obviously, but no, different, deep, and done. Yeah. I mean, because it is, and I think you just really nailed it with that description, because we're not sitting here saying like, oh, it's the same thing to lose a spouse. It's the same thing to lose a child. No, but we exist too. And I so relate to your story, because I was actually just sitting here just so ingrained and engrossed in this story and listening to you and going, oh my God, I don't think anybody ever asked me how I was doing except for my best friend who had lost her mother just right before my brother, which I've shared with all of you guys that story. And she was really my rock during all of this, as well as my other guy friend. And that was it. They were the only ones. And they almost didn't even need to ask me how I was, because they knew I was terrible. The answer was always, I'm not good. Right. So it's like, it was more like, hey, what can I do for you? It was like, they were just there. So I don't know that anybody really said, how are you? It's either they knew because they knew my heart, or it was like, so yes.
And I'll say there were people who would like send a text and be like, how are you? And in my head, I'm like, are they saying, how are you? Or were they like, hey, how are you? And I'd be like, well, all right, I don't know. What are you asking me? Are you asking me how I actually am? Or is this like the intro to like some text conversation and I should just say like, I'm good, thanks. How are you? So it's awkward and tough. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. That's totally different, and something like we relate to. So if you guys are getting those messages, like there's a difference between the two. And I think it's also important to understand too that sometimes people they honestly don't know. So it's important to bring awareness to this topic.
Yes. And that's something we talk about a lot at group, is that the really insensitive and terrible statements that are thrown at us, or phrases we hear and we are routinely saying to each other, like, say nothing. I'd rather you say nothing. Give me a look, but don't say something that is just, don't tell me someone's in a better place. Don't tell me they're at peace now. He might be. Look, I've been to 2 mediums since I lost him, and I know he's in a better place. I get it, but I don't need someone to justify or like rationalize his death to me by saying he's better off. Like he's in. No, say nothing. If you're uncomfortable and you don't know what to say, really say nothing. Just say, I'm thinking about you. That's it. Make it about me. You don't have to make it about my brother or anyone's sibling who has died. Yeah. Because we're still here. And
that's really great advice, because this is our hope, right, Jen, is that we can get the message across, because we're 6 years into this. I'm coming up right behind you. Not that it's something I want to be doing, but coming up right behind you. This is our hope, that it's not just for the surviving sibling, right? It's for the extension, right? That we're bringing awareness to this, so that we're not hearing those ridiculous phrases anymore. I love that you brought this up, because they're in a better place, or do you really know that? No, you don't. You really don't know that. Nope. It's about me and about how I feel about it, and that's fine. So yeah, I love that. I'm thinking about you. I'm here for you. That's another good one. I'm here for you if you need anything. I like that one too, but don't say it if you don't mean it. That's another big one.
I'm telling you, since my brother died, I have completely stopped. When I learn of someone who has passed, right? And like, obviously I know someone who is still surviving from them, whether it's a friend or a grandparent who has been lost, or a parent, or whatever. I absolutely refuse to send them a text, an email, or to say in person, like, I'm so sorry for your loss. Because the number of times I heard that, it was so uncomfortable. Because what am I supposed? I'm so sorry. That's okay. What? It's not like, that's what you say when someone apologizes, right? Like, I'm sorry. That's okay. I don't need you to tell me that you're sorry. Like, I get the sentiment that they're trying to convey, but you hear it so many freaking times, it loses all meaning. And I don't know that we have words or language created to convey what it is we're trying to convey. And like, that's literally what I say now. Like, I can't say I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry you're experiencing this, but like, this just sucks. Like, I'm here. Like, I'll do what you need. Like, please, like, but I can't do that. Oh, I'm sorry for your loss. And then like move on. And it drives me like, yeah.
Yeah, that's powerful too, because I think if I had like a penny for every time I've heard that, and I'm sure it's the exact same for you. Yeah. we'd be saving all the surviving siblings
Right.
now.
And look, and I get it. Like, and again, before I lost my brother, like, that's what I would say to anyone. You go to a funeral and you give them a hug and you're like, I'm so sorry. And I meant it, but like being on the receiving end of that, I was like, oh shit, that means nothing to me now. Like, because it puts this weird burden on you as like the person who lost someone to like, I don't know, make the other person feel better about like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, you can't say nothing to that. So I just found myself being like, it's okay, thank you. But like, that was a weird exchange. And I was like, I'm never doing that to another person ever again. And I'm sorry to all of you that I said that to prior to my own experience. So there you go.
This is Jen's mass apology for that.
There you go. If I ever said I'm sorry for your loss, I'm sorry for saying that to you.
Oh my gosh, Jen and I like to bring some levity to this.
Always.
Oh my gosh. But no, I think you brought up a really great topic here, and language and the way we talk about this. And I hope it just continues to improve. And I think that's just anything, right? As we bring awareness to it and bring light to it, because this has been going on. I mean, people have been losing siblings forever, right? We just not talked about it. We've not brought awareness to it. So again, we don't wish you to join this club, but it's a good thing to bring awareness to. And
for sure. And I just want to say, going back a little bit to how losing a child, right, is like the worst loss you can experience. And again, different losses, but I don't think anyone ever considers that like your siblings are really, aside from your parents, the people you know from the day you're born, that you and now you're excluding your parents, that you expect to know for the majority of your life. Like, you expect to have an entire lifetime with them. So yes, do parents lose children? Yes. Did parents, like, all parents were once just individuals who didn't have those children, so they had a whole life before children. And I'm not minimizing that, and I'm not being insensitive. I'm just trying to get people to understand the significance of the sibling relationship, because it's not just like, oh, it's your first friend. Like, he was the first person, the only person aside from my parents that like was in my life from day one. And the difference between him and my parents was that I was supposed to know him and have him in my life until like the last day or close to the last day. And it's gone. So yeah, I don't think it's really looked at like that or talked about like that as much as I think it could be or should be or needs to be, to help people maybe understand the loss.
Well said again. Very well said again. And I know that's why it's so traumatizing. I know it. I mean, living through it myself, you've lived through it. You guys listening, most of you have lived through it as well. And we don't. And that's, it's not just that it's your first friend. It's also your first enemy. It's also your first fighting partner. It's your first person that you make forts with and play with. I mean, it's a lot of firsts, but you spend, and they know more about you than even your parents most of the time, because you do. I mean, again, you just said that so beautifully, Jen. Yes, thank you for adding that, because we're not trying to minimize, we're trying to maximize what people are minimizing. So I think that's really important what you said there. So yes, so we're going to jump back to where we were before, jumping forward to jump back. Let's talk about COPE. So COPE has been integral and totally just helped you in your journey, but now you are super involved with COPE. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I am. So like I still am in the sibling support group, but I guess in 2019, the president of the board at the time popped in to our sibling group. She was like the newly elected president of the board, and she was making the rounds to introduce herself and to see the groups firsthand and listen a little bit. And so she was someone who had lost a child, and she didn't stay in our group for very long, but she did say as she was leaving that she thanked all of us. And I don't remember exactly how she said it, but she was so moved by everything we were saying and how we all related to each other and how we were all sort of saying the same exact thing about our families, right? And about our losses and the relationships with people in our families since the loss. And she said, these are conversations I've never had with my kids before. And I have no idea what they think about me. And I have no idea how they think I've like done, like as their parent, since the loss of their brother, my son. So she thanked us for like letting her share the space for a little bit, and she left. And of course I went home that night and I sent her an email and thanked her for coming and for like speaking so honestly the way that she did, and said that I really think it's important for there to be some kind of help for families to have better, different, more meaningful conversation about their losses, because again, it's you've experienced the same loss, but you're not experiencing it in the same way. And I think, and I was saying all this in an email to her, that I think the surviving kids, the sibling losers, don't always feel comfortable talking to their parents about their sibling who has died, because it upsets, obviously it's going to make your parents cry, and no one wants to make their parents cry. And I think parents don't know what to say to their surviving kids, or don't know if we want them to say anything to us. So yes, that was my email to her, just that I appreciated that she was able to share that with us, whatever. So we emailed back and forth for a couple of months, and then she had asked me if I was interested in getting more involved with like the program committee or the family advisory committee. And I was like, yeah, no, totally, that's cool. And then like COVID hit, so everything kind of shifted within the organization. Nothing was happening, obviously, in person for a pretty long time, but I joined committees and we did Zoom meetings and tried to plan for programs to be done virtually and brainstorm different ideas. And then towards the end of 2020, I guess, she asked if I would be interested in applying to join the board of COPE. And I was like, oh, that's like the most grown up thing I've ever heard in my life for myself. And I was like, yeah, yes, I would be like a legit grown up if I was on the board of directors for something. So yeah, she was all about trying to like grow the size of COPE's board. And I think she wanted to, and in a sincere way, integrate more siblings onto the board. A lot of the board members are parents who have lost children, but there had not been, at that point, I think, a sibling who had lost a sibling that was on the board. So I submitted my application and did that. So I joined the board in March of 2021. And at the end of 2021, that woman, Sandy, who was the past president, announced that she was stepping down. She had to move out of state and just didn't think she could give everything that she wanted to be able to give to COPE, and that the board was going to have to come up with a new president. So a lot of eyes, and we're still on Zoom at this point, like turned to this guy, Larry, who was the vice president of the board at that time. And he was like, oh, wait, what? He's like, I don't think I'm in a position to do this. Like, I got a lot going on. And I think everyone respected that, but then it was sort of like, well, what's going to happen now? So I text Larry in the middle of the board meeting and I was like, yo, we should do this together. And he wrote back like, what? And like, that was the end of the conversation. I was like, okay, never mind. So a few weeks passed and we had conversations since then, like Larry and I, and he sent me a text and he's like, were you serious about that? And I wrote back and I was like, serious about what? Like, I don't, and he was like being co-presidents. And I was like, oh shit. Yeah, no, I could be serious about that if you're serious about that. And he was like, I'd be serious about it, like only with you though. And I was like, cool. So we kind of like spoke a little bit and decided that we were going to like make a pitch to Sandy and see what she thought about it as the president. And, you know, I think she thought it was creative. She had a lot of questions. And I think the board as a whole had a lot of questions. And I think the best answer that Larry and I came up with, which was honest and true, so we might not have all the answers right now, but you have two people who want to do it, and we work well together. I've told Larry he reminds me so much of my brother, and it's fun to have like that bantering back and forth. Yeah. So yeah, we're pretty different, but our heart is in it. And yeah, so now I'm co-president of the board with Larry. And if I thought being a board member was like a grown-up thing, like being like a co-president, that's like really grown up. So yeah, so it's really cool. It's still a little bit surreal to me that that's what I am. But yeah, so that's that. And since then we have welcomed another board member, another sibling from our sibling loser group, also named Jen, who also feels pretty strongly about getting the word out about sibling loss and trying to just create more awareness and opportunities for siblings who have lost siblings to have like a space and a place to be heard and feel acknowledged. So that's how that happened.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that story. Congratulations again on your presidency and
Yeah,
your
thanks.
collaboration with Larry. And I know what it's like to collaborate with someone that reminds you, especially of like your sibling that's passed. It's a special thing. It's like, again, indescribable, and only people listening that understand that will understand this. But it's indescribable. So, and how cool that you have another Jen. So you guys are like Jen squared on there that really gets it. So really, really cool. Really excited about that. And just so you guys know too, in a couple weeks, October 11th, so just a few short weeks after you guys listen to this episode, we are going to be collaborating on a workshop. So October 11th, 7 p.m. Eastern. Jen, if you want to share a couple tidbits about it, but I will be on the workshop, and two of Cope's own will be on the workshop. Jen, if you want to add a little bit to that.
Yeah, totally. So Maya and I have talked about this, and I think we both feel pretty strongly that look, families need help having conversations, understanding where each other are coming from for no reason other than like you're still family, and if your family feels a little bit broken, that's pretty normal. Doesn't mean it has to stay that way. If you've, I yeah. So we're going to have a sibling loser from Cope, Maureen, and we're going to have a Cope parent who has lost a child, Jeff, and they're going to have a sit down conversation with Maya and share their perspectives. And I think maybe ask questions of each other to try to maybe help other parents and surviving siblings out there, like learn how to have conversations with each other about their loss and their experiences moving forward through the loss and moving forward through their life, and just to, again, encourage maybe the healing process even just a little bit. So hopefully you guys can tune into that.
Yeah, definitely October 11th. If you're listening to this at another time, it's 2022 September. Yeah, so it'll be at 7 p.m. Eastern, and the link will be in the show notes. So really excited about that. Well, Jen, before we let you go, you've given us so much information. Thank you for sharing the story of you, your grief journey, and of course, the story of your incredible brother. But what I got to ask before we let you go, what would you wish, I mean, this is such a loaded question, but what do you wish you would have known as a surviving sibling before you lost your brother? What's some little pieces of advice, or maybe a big piece of advice you can give us as surviving siblings, or somebody that's like you, 2 weeks, 3 weeks in, maybe going into group, thinking about it, thinking about going to therapy? What do you wish you knew?
So, I mean, honestly, I don't think there's anything I wish I had known before I lost him, because I don't think it would have meant anything to me. I don't think I would have been able to comprehend it in a way that I was able to comprehend it once I had lost him. I will say the best piece of advice, or the best thing anyone said to me, like at the time of his death, was to be kind and to be gentle with yourself. And I read it in the email and I was like, huh, I wonder what what does that mean? And weeks pass and months pass, and I would find myself in these like crying fits, right? Grief bursts, and random things would set me off, and I would get so irritated, and I'd be like, why are you still doing this? And I was like, oh, be kind to yourself. Maybe that's what she meant. Like, so I don't know that I really knew it at the time, like what it meant. So I'm going to tell all of you now, and anyone else who knows someone who maybe has lost a sibling, or anyone, be kind to yourself. Let yourself feel what you're feeling. Ignoring it or getting angry at yourself for feeling it isn't going to change them. It's not going to make your feelings go away. Yeah, let yourself have your feelings. And look, it could take a year, it could take 2 years, it could take 6 years. At some point, though, it will feel a little easier. Your day will not feel quite as shitty. It won't be such overwhelming pain or grasping for air every time you like think about your sibling. But be patient with yourself and be kind.
That's great advice. I wish I knew. I wish I knew what they meant too. I love that you said this, because I'm sure there's a lot of you that have been told that, or will be told that through your grief journey. Be kind to yourself, be patient with yourself. And you feel so much pressure to move on at a certain point, or do certain things. Like, I love that advice. Be kind to yourself. And I love that you just really defined for us what that means.
I will also say that if anyone tells you to move on, move on from them.
I love that.
I
Yeah.
mean, there's no moving on from this, right? Because it just sort of gives the idea that it's something to get over and like put behind you. And try doing that. I dare you. Like, it's not going to work. So like, there's a big difference, and we've talked about this, between moving on and moving forward. We have to move forward, but like, it doesn't mean we're leaving anyone behind. Doesn't mean we're just going to get over this. And again, like, I'm 6 years out. I'm sure uh, I'll be 20 years out, and something one day randomly is going to make me just start sobbing. And that's okay. That it is what it is, and just be cool with that. So if someone tells you to move on, I'm telling you, move on from them. Trim the fat.
Yep. It's happened to me. People have told me that, and I moved on from them. So
There
another
you go.
great piece of advice. Well, Jen, thank you again for sharing your story, LB's story. I again feel him today here with us. And thank you guys so much for listening. Where can we find you, Jen? Where can we find more about COPE? Obviously, we're going to share all of the information in the show notes and where to find us for our exciting workshop. Can't wait to do it on October 11th, guys. But again, where can we connect with you, Jen, and COPE?
Sure. So COPE, find them on Instagram, cope.foundation. Facebook, it's COPE, which is Connecting Our Paths Eternally. copefoundation.org is the website. And if you want to send me an email, it's jen@copefoundation.org. 1 N in Jen, not 2. So yeah, reach out. Yeah, join us.
Wonderful. And you will get a welcome wagon or welcome email from Jen, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome. Jen, thank you so much for being here
Maya,
today.
thank you for having me, but also thank you for doing this. And I remember when I first saw this in one of the Facebook groups that we're in, a sibling lost to or something, right? They're all sort of called the same thing. And I was like, oh, this woman's a fucking genius, like a podcast, because there's nothing out there. I remember looking even for books and I wasn't into podcasts really at the time, but I was so desperate that I was looking at podcasts, and there's like a couple out there, but it's weird and awkward, and it's just poorly done, and it's not really about sibling loss. And I was like, genius, she's just a genius. So thank you for sharing your story and sharing it with everyone, and allowing everyone else to have this space with you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Surviving Siblings podcast. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did creating it for you, then share it on your chosen social media platform. And don't forget to tag us at Surviving Siblings Podcast so that more surviving siblings can find us. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Surviving Siblings Podcast. All links can be found in the show notes, so be sure to check those out too. Thank you again for the support. Until the next episode, keep on surviving, my surviving siblings.